I want to start with the most famous sentence in the Book of Ruth. You may know it already. It has been spoken at weddings, at funerals, at moments of profound human solidarity across many centuries. It is one of the most beautiful declarations of loyalty in all of world literature. Where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you. Ruth says this to her mother-in-law, Naomi, not to her husband, not to a lover, to a mother-in-law who has just told her to go home. And this choice, this act of freely choosing where you belong, who your people are, what your home is at the absolute heart of what Otto Rank has to say about this story. Otto Rank is a figure who deserves to be far better known than he is. He is one of the most brilliant of Freud's inner circle, perhaps the most creative, certainly the most unusual. He joined Freud's Wednesday Psychological Society as a young man in his early 20s and became one of Freud's closest collaborators. He was for years the secretary of the Vienna Psychoanalytic Society, editor of its journals, and the keeper of the minutes of those legendary Wednesday evenings. And then he broke with Freud, not acrimoniously, or at least not entirely so, but decisively, because Rank had arrived at a different understanding of what was most fundamental in human psychology. For Freud, the central drama was the Oedipus complex, the child's relationship to the father, desire and prohibition, sex and the superego. For Rank, the central drama was something earlier, the experience of birth itself, and what he called the birth trauma, the infant's passage from the womb, from a state of absolute security, warmth, and containment into the cold, separate, demanding world, the first separation. This became, for Rank, the template of all subsequent human experience. Every development, every growth, every act of becoming more fully yourself involves a separation, leaving behind what is safe and known and contained, and moving into something new and unknown. And every such separation carries an echo of that first one, the mixture of terror and the emergence of self. Rank called the central tension of human life the tension between the fear of life and the fear of death. Not biological death, but two kinds of psychological death. The fear of life is the fear of separation or individuating, of becoming your own person, of standing alone. The fear of death is the fear of merger, of losing yourself, of being reabsorbed, of ceasing to be distinct. Every human being, Rank argued, is navigating between these two poles throughout their entire existence. And the healthiest, fullest human life is one which the person has developed the will, what Rank called the will, a concept he developed extensively to actively choose their own separations and their own connections, not to be driven by anxiety in either direction, but to choose freely and consciously where they stand. Ruth in the Book of Ruth is one of the most striking examples of this in all of literature. Let me tell you the story. Naomi is a Hebrew woman who, with her husband and two sons, had emigrated to the land of Moab during a famine in Israel. Both sons married Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth, and then Naomi's husband died. Both sons died. She was left with two daughters-in-law in a foreign land with no men of the family remaining. She decides to return to Israel. She sets out with both daughters-in-law, and on the road she stops and tells them to go back. Return to your mother's houses. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt kindly with the dead and with me. May you each find rest in the house of your husband. She kisses them, and they all weep. They say, we will return with you to your people. Naomi insists, go back. There is nothing I can give you. I have no more sons to be your husbands. I am too old to have a husband. Even if I could, and even if I had sons tonight, would you wait for them until they were grown? No. Return to your people. And Orpah, we should say a word for Orpah, who is not the villain of this story, though she is often treated as one. Orpah kisses her mother-in-law and goes back. It's the rational choice. It is what any reasonable person would do. She has her own family, her own people, her own future to build. But Ruth clings to Naomi. And Naomi says, see, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. And Ruth says, do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. And then the famous words. What Rank would notice immediately is the quality of Ruth's will in this moment. She is not swept along by circumstances. She is not following a law or fulfilling an obligation. There is no obligation that requires her to stay. Naomi has explicitly released her, not once but twice, with every encouragement to return to her own people. Every rational, self-interested argument points towards Orpah's choice. Ruth's choice is free, genuinely free. And it is precisely this quality of freedom that makes it so extraordinary. Rank spent a great deal of his later work distinguishing between what he called the adapted will and the creative will. The adapted will is the will that operates within the given framework, that does what circumstances require, what social expectation demands, what survival logic recommends. Orpah's choice is an act of the adapted will. She follows the path that is laid out for her. Ruth's choice is an act of creative will. She creates something new, a new identity, a new belonging, a new people. She chooses her mother-in-law. She chooses a God she was not born to. She chooses a land she has never lived in. She constitutes herself through this act of will as someone whose identity is not given by birth but enacted by choice. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. This is the most radical act of self-definition in the book. Ruth is not saying, I will tolerate your people and I will adjust to your God. She is saying, I am taking them on as mine. I am choosing actively, consciously to become other than what I was born. This is not assimilation in the passive sense. It is transformation in the active, willed sense. Rank would also be interested in what Ruth does not say. She does not say, I have no one else. She does not say, I have no better option. The text is clear that she does have another option, her own people, her own mother's house, the possibility of finding another husband among her own kind, as Naomi explicitly encourages. She does not choose Naomi because she must. She chooses Naomi because she will. There is a quality in Ruth's love for Naomi that transcends the categories of obligation and utility. It is, in Rank's framework, a love that arises from the self rather than from the need. The person who loves out of need, who clings to another because of fear of separation, because they cannot tolerate aloneness, because the other person feels an unbearable emptiness, is in what Rank calls the dependent will. Their love is real, but it is entangled with their own incompleteness. Ruth's love does not read this way. She could go. She chooses to stay. The staying is what makes the love extraordinary. And then there is a question of belonging itself, because the rest of the book of Ruth is about Ruth entering a world that is not hers by birth, gleaning in the fields behind the harvesters, following the custom of the Israelite poor, and being received. Being seen by Boaz, a kinsman of Naomi's late husband, who has noticed her, who asks about her, who tells his workers to leave extra grain for her to find. Boaz says to her, all the town knows that you are a woman of excellence, and you came to a people you had not known before. A woman of excellence. The Hebrew word is chayil, the same word used in Proverbs 31 for the woman of valor, or Eshet Chayil, the capable woman. It carries the connotation not just of goodness, but of strength, of active virtue. You came to a people you had not known before. Boaz sees the choice. He sees the will behind it. He sees the kind of person who is capable of such a choice, and he recognizes it as excellence. The Book of Ruth ends with a marriage, with a child, with Naomi holding the child on her lap, the neighbors saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." The woman who had returned from Moab, calling herself Mara, bitter, who had said, "I went out full, but the Lord has brought me back empty," now holds a grandchild. The circle completes. And the child's name is Obed. And Obed is the father of Jesse. And Jesse is the father of David. Ruth, the Moabite woman who chose, is in the lineage of Israel's greatest king. Her freely chosen belonging becomes, over generations, the seed of a dynasty. Rank would say this is what the creative will makes possible, not just personal transformation, but the kind of transformation that ripples outward and forward. The act of freely choosing where you belong, of saying your people are my people when you have every right to say something else, creates something that endures. Belonging is not given. Belonging, at its deepest, is enacted, chosen and willed.